Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second ever Abney Park podcast. I told you if you guys liked it, I'd keep this up, and I did get a lot of interactions on that last one, so we're going to keep going. So as always, if you're enjoying this, make sure you comment or like it or give a little heart on Patreon. I want to make sure I know that you guys are into this if I'm going to put all the time into it. This is a Patreon exclusive. If you follow us on Patreon, you'll be able to download the songs that I feature in this episode. So without further ado, let's get right into it. The first song I want to talk about today is a song called Flora and Fauna. This is off the Abney Park album, The Subaquatic Opera, which I think came out in 2021. All right, so Flora and Fauna. Here's the principles behind this song. I was thinking about nature. I was thinking about how when an animal dies, the fauna of the world, its body falls to the soil and it decomposes, and that creates all of this nutrients for the flora of the world, the plants. And so the plants take these nutrients from the soil and they turn that into energy. They photosynthesize and turn that into the energy. And then the animals will eat these plants, well, at least at the bottom of the food chain. You've got all the grazers, like the cattle and deer and whatnot. They'll eat the plants and they will take that energy, and then they'll get eaten by other animals that'll then take that energy. And then when any of these animals die, again, they'll return this energy back to the soil. And so I thought about this, about how flora and fauna both sort of feed energy off of each other. The plants get energy from the sun, and from the decomposing animals, they get nutrients. And then the animals get energy by eating the plants. A very symbiotic relationship, if I'm using the term right. Well, I was thinking about that. I think I must have been on a hike, or maybe I was on the boat looking at the shoreline, watching the seals eat the fish and the fish eat the algae and whatnot. I remembered back to my novel series, and I remember there was a couple in the novel series. It was actually the Emperor Victor's two wives that he nicknamed Flora and Fauna. And I thought, that's interesting. Flora and fauna in nature kind of are like two lovers. So I decided to write a song about flora and fauna as if they were two lovers that sort of fed energy off of each other as they made love. And how there was this balance to this relationship. The metaphor of the two lovers in nature and the two lovers in the story. And then I thought about how mankind sort of throws off this balance, right? Because we don't really give energy back to nature. We take energy from nature. We eat the animals. We eat the plants, but we don't provide them with anything back for that. And so it throws this balance, and it throws nature all out of harmony and starts this sort of downward spiral. So that's what the song is about. The song is this metaphor for nature and how the flora and the fauna make this perfect relationship, this perfect balanced coupling, and how mankind comes in and sets that whole thing off balance. So the lyrics to the song went like this. Flora and fauna were lovers. They cared for each other, feeding and nurturing all of their days. Flora grew when fauna fell, and fauna fed off flora. And fauna grew when flora fell, and flora fed off fauna. Each were hunter and prey. They gave to each other this way, consumed each other's bodies all of their days. But then they met a man, and he set them off balance. He consumed their bodies all of his days. So that's what the lyrics mean. Let's take a listen. Here is Flora and Fauna.
They cared for each other, feeding and nurturing all of their days. Flora and fauna fell, fauna fell of Flora. Other's bodies, all of their days. Then they met a man. He set them on balance. He consumed their bodies.
Okay, for the next song, I want to cover a song off of the newest album, The Intergalactic Juke Joint. So this song is called Their Own Folklore. What I was talking about in this song is, this is actually a story or a setting from early in my relationship with my wife, Christina, who's also the keyboard player of Abney Park. Early on, we were in a band together and we were both married to other people. My first wife was a professional athlete, and she ended up leaving me and going off with her coach. And I suppose it's not my place to say why, but Christina's first marriage was also falling apart. I was good friends with her husband at the time, so I kind of saw the relationship from both sides and kind of saw what was going on. When by the time her first marriage fell apart, I had been recently divorced myself, maybe about a month single, and I had a rental house that I shared with my cousin Scott at the time, and I think I was in my mid-20s. Christina had no place to live, getting a divorce herself, so she came and moved in with me and Scott. Well, we had been both sort of married to stick in the muds, and actually we were in a band together at the time as well, and so we were really into the club scene. This was the late 90s club scene in Seattle. It was a big goth scene, and we hung out at clubs like The Vogue, which is our second home, the Catwalk Club, the Phoenix Underground, Knock Knock. There were all these amazing clubs that we used to frequent at least 5 nights a week. We were on the dance floor. not really dating, or at least we didn't realize at the time. We were just having fun, the fun that we hadn't had in years, having been in these failing marriages. So the lyrics to the song, they're actually pretty personal. They describe each of our standpoints during this time in our life. Let me read them to you. Sitting on a patchwork sofa in a rental home, emotions gray, feeling all alone. There must be more to life than old carpet and peeling paint, cobwebs and dust. Was this her fate? In an alley, running, she grabs his hand. They hear the club drums pulsing, the call is grand. Past the doorman onto the packed dance floor, spinning, turning, becoming their own folklore. Strobes are flashing, glitter and sparkling eyes. Sweat is dripping, skirt and tall thigh highs. His hands around her, feeling her narrow waist, pulled her closer, lips upon her face. She was all he thought about when he was home alone at night. White blonde pigtails, pale skin so tight. Now it seems his story was something that he could rewrite. He held out his hand. They ran into the night. In an alley, running, she grabs his hand. Hear the club drums pulsing, the call is grand. Past the doorman, onto the packed dance floor. Spinning, turning, becoming their own folklore. Strobes are flashing, glitter and sparkling eyes. Sweat is dripping, skirt and tall thigh highs. His hands around her, feeling her narrow waist. Pulled her closer, lips upon her face. So that's how our relationship began in the goth clubs of Seattle in the 90s. Playing those little dive bars and going dancing every night of the week in those dance clubs. It was an amazing time and I miss it. Oh, and one last little note. One of the things I tried really hard to do when I was writing this song was to make the style of the song feel like those 90s goth anthems that we used to listen to. So if the song feels sort of familiar and you were in that scene as well, that's why. Here's their own folklore.
Sitting on a patchwork sofa in a rental home. Emotions gray, feeling all alone. There must be more to life than old carpet and peeling paint, cobwebs and dust. Was this her fate? In an alley, running, she grabs his hand. Hear the club drums pulsing, the cold is grand. Past the doorman under the back dance floor, spinning, turning, becoming their own folklore. Strobes are flashing, glitter and sparkling eyes. Sweat is dripping, skin and tall thigh highs. Hands around her, feeling her narrow waist. Pull her closer, lips upon her face. She was all he thought about when he was home alone at night. White blonde pigtails, pale skin so tight. Now it seems the story was something that he could rewrite. He held out his hand, they ran into the night. In an alley, running, she grabs his hand. Hear the club drums pulsing, the cold is grand. Past the doorman under the back dance floor, spinning, turning, becoming their own folklore. Strobes are flashing, glitter and sparkling eyes. Sweat is dripping, skin and tall thigh highs. Hands around her, feeling her narrow waist. Pull her closer, lips upon her face. blushing hair and sparkling eyes, sweat is dripping, skin and tall by highs. Hands around her, feeling a narrow waist, pull her closer, lips upon her face.
I love that song. The energy of that, playing it live is just a blast to me. So anyway, I hope you like that one. The next song I want to talk about is a song called Captain Ulysses. This entire song, well, the story behind it, came to me in a dream. I dreamt I was standing on a beach and I was a very old man. And there was a huge storm and the waves were battering the shore. And I could see just offshore the ruins of a ship, an old tall ship, my ship. It had hit reefs and it had sunk just offshore, and I had barely swum to shore, and being old and frail, I had barely survived it. And I remember not having fear or sadness, but just anger at the sea. The lyrics went like this. Captain Ulysses stood on the shore, exhausted and angry and spent. The sea had recently taken his ship. It was salty and bloody and bent. And each wave that struck him, as he angrily yelled and he swung his fists at the sea, relentless they battered and turned him and drenched him and knocked him down to his knees. I've fought against you nearly all of my life, and the battle has wearied my soul. But the sea pulled back for one final hit. Then it struck him and swallowed him whole. So what did this story mean to me? Why was I dreaming this? What did this mean to my life? And I realized, though I had known that I was the captain, I think the ocean was symbolic of a struggle with money and a struggle with career over all the decades. You see, Abney Park started writing music in a different time. The earliest part of our career, we of course all had day jobs and we played to tiny little crowds in tiny little clubs and didn't make much money at all. And eventually, we started selling enough albums, and I'm talking about physical albums, CDs and even cassettes, that I got to quit my day job and be full-time at Abney Park. And of course, that was a dream come true. That is living the dream. But soon enough, the internet came along. That's how long we've been around. The internet came along, and people realized they could download our music instead of buying physical CDs or cassettes. Sites like Napster and Pirates Bay and things like that, these sites would give them our music for free, and so we wouldn't get paid. So this caused us huge financial damage. Our incomes went way down, and we pleaded with fans, please, if you really do love our music, buy our albums. This is how we pay for our lives. And the fans listened. And actually at the same time, there was a positive change in the industry. Sites like iTunes started selling MP3s, and we started selling MP3s from our website, which fans would buy the music and download it. Now, if they bought it from Apple on iTunes, Apple would take about 40% of the revenue. So we're making less money per sale, but the ship is still afloat, right? So throughout the early 2000s, we're starting to do good again. People are buying our albums online. We're slowly developing more and more fans, and even though Apple is now taking 40% of our revenue, we're selling a lot more albums, and so we're doing okay, and we're keeping afloat. But then along came Spotify, and again the boat is struck. The appeal to fans is easy. They don't really have to pay for music if they listen to ads, and if they want to not listen to ads, they can pay $10 a month, of which Spotify keeps almost all the money, despite what the propaganda tells you, where Apple used to give us about 60 cents per song download. Spotify is now giving us a tiny, tiny sliver of 1 penny per download. So now we need about 1,000 downloads just to make a buck. And the buck doesn't go very far these days. And of course, yet again, we've been getting more and more fans. Spotify reports that we get about 60,000 to 100,000 unique people listening every month. That's not downloads, that's unique fans. Certainly 60,000 to 100,000 people a month should be able to support a band. But from that, we get barely a fraction of what we used to make. A teeny slice of what we used to make. And that with maybe 100 times more fans than we used to have. Well, we weren't the only band that realized how unfair this was. Lots of major and middle-level artists like ourselves fought back against Spotify, and eventually one of them created Patreon, which is where you fine gentlemen and ladies come in. So now our album sales are supplemented by our Patreon money. Still not enough money to live off of, but still not as much money as we used to make back when people bought albums, but we've still got a little bit of album selling going on. But at least we have live concerts that we can perform around the world to supplement our income, and if we're lucky, those concerts turn a profit. Then the pandemic hit, and live concerts all over the world shut down. All in about 2 weeks, we lost several years of concerts, got canceled from our calendar. And that's when we came up with the idea of these streaming concerts. We would live broadcast to people who were also in lockdown, and we would put on a full show, and we would sell really inexpensive tickets compared to what concert tickets cost these days. And that money came back and was worth it. That money plus album sales was finally getting back to where we had been before Spotify and Apple and sites like them started stealing all of the revenue from our music, from everybody's music. And while the lockdown was going on, this was great. We made great revenue, and we were finally paying all our bills, catching up on things, replacing broken equipment that we had never been able to afford to replace before. But then, as lockdowns lifted, less and less people started buying tickets. And at the same time, more and more people were becoming addicted to streaming sites. It was a whole lot easier to just not buy the music and just stream it from the site than it was to actually pay the bands. So once again, the revenue started to go back down again. Here's what's interesting. With the number of people who listen to us just on Spotify alone, not talking about all of the other streaming sites like Amazon or Apple or anything like that, if each one of them would buy an album from us every year, it would cost the fans 1/12 what they pay on Spotify, and our album sales would be over $1 million a year. We live a modest life on a cul-de-sac. That would be pretty amazing for us. The final blow came recently when we released our latest album. So many fans posted on social media, instead of buying the album at all, they were just going to wait and listen to it on Spotify. I pleaded with fans, please buy the album, please don't just stream it. And some fans got angry and complained that they didn't have enough money to buy an album and they would rather just not buy it. And in the end, album sales didn't amount to much at all. And it really makes me wonder, what's the point in continuing to write albums if we don't get paid for them? All the while, hundreds of thousands of people are listening to our music every month on Spotify. So this is what the song Captain Ulysses is about. It's about this war between the captain and trying to keep the ship afloat, even though the turbulent sea keeps changing and keeps threatening to sink the boat.
exhausted and angry and spent. The sea had recently taken his ship. It was salty and bloody and bent. Each wave that struck him, he angrily yelled, and he swung his fists at the sea. Relentlessly battered and turned and drenched him, knocked him down to his knees. Fought against you nearly all of my life. The battle has wearied my soul. But the sea pulled back for one final hit. Then it struck him and swallowed him whole. Fighting the ocean, the turbulent motion was pointless as oceans transform. Breaking and crashing, consuming and bashing, change or be lost to the storm. Each wave that struck him as he held and he swung his fists at the sea. Relentless they battered and turned and drenched him and knocked him down to his knees. Fought against you nearly all of my life. The battle has wearied my soul. But the sea pulled back for one final hit. Then it struck him and swallowed him whole. Fighting the ocean, the turbulent motion was pointless as oceans transform. Breaking and crashing, consuming and bashing, change or be lost to the storm. Fighting the ocean, the turbulent motion was pointless and useless. It mocked his devotion for oceans and currents will ebb and will always transform. Breaking and crashing, consuming and bashing, destroying direction, invoking rejection, change and transform, or you always will lose to the storm.
Okay, the next song I want to talk about is a song called A Good Brainwashing. It's off our latest album, the Intergalactic Juke Joint. And here's how this lyric came to be. If you watch the news every day or read the news online or on social media, and I highly recommend you don't do any of those things, you soon get the impression everybody is going insane. Like, the number of friends and family members that I've had in the last, 3 years that have completely changed their mind on political opinions, on social issues, on scientific issues, is just nuts. And I've been watching members of both parties, both the Democrats and the Republicans, half of those parties going further and further and more crazy. I know you've seen it too. And what's really bizarre to me is that everybody's so confident about this new thing that they've only believed for the last couple of years. They didn't used to have this opinion. If you could dial back in time 6 years ago and ask them how they felt on X topic, I don't want to get into the specifics because I know so many people have been driven insane by the last few years that they would just flame war to hell out of this if I said any opinion on any side in any direction. But anyway, everybody's so convinced of whatever crazy new opinion they just had, and everybody on both sides seem really comfortable and relaxed in their self-righteousness. Let me give you an example without giving you an example. I've seen people on the left show up with guns and torches to protest people on the right showing up with guns and torches to state political opinions on either the left or the right, and both sides think this is justified. So I'm just sitting here watching the whole thing, wide-eyed, exasperated, wondering what kind of brainwashing has driven everybody insane. And that's when I realized maybe I'd be a lot more happy if I was one of those brainwashed people. Not that I think it's possible. So that's when I came up with the idea for this song. Maybe I could just use a good brainwashing. So instead of sitting here being horrified about what the rest of the world is doing, I could smugly sit back confidently knowing that my brainwashing was the best brainwashing of all the brainwashing happening to anyone. And that's where this song came about. Here you go. This is A Good Brainwashing.
My head is filled with many things, things that soil my brain. Futile, angry, dirty thoughts placed by a world in pain. Need to scrub these thoughts away, they never should be mine. Need to scrub between my ears, then I'll be just fine. Well, I could use a good brainwashing. Scrub my mind from ear to ear. Cover my eyes with blinders. Block everything that I hear. Cognitive behavioral therapy, psychoanalysis, maybe a mixture of pears and elixir, like my dialysis. Well, I can use a good brainwashing, maybe just sunshine and rum. I can use a good marination, soaking my brain till I'm numb.
About feeling sick the way I did. I never used to feel sick before. I used to feel like the very opposite.
I'm thankful for my peace of mind when my brain is not in motion. Thankful for the sunny days and the waves upon the ocean. Late at night when there's no light, my mind just makes me sick. So I could use a good brainwashing, that'll do the trick.
For becoming healthy, that's all.
Well, I could use a good brainwashing. Scrub my mind from ear to ear. Cover my eyes with blinders. Block everything that I hear. Cognitive behavioral therapy or psychoanalysis. Maybe a mixture of pears and elixir, like my dialysis.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for listening to another episode of the Abney Park Podcast. If you're following on Patreon, all of the songs that are in this episode you can download now. as well as being able to download the whole episode as an MP3, commercial-free. Thank you for being an Abbey Park fan. Love you guys all. See you on the next episode.